husband was making dinner when his coworker texted him, "I miss you." I replied for him, "Come over." Most women would have thrown the phone. Most would have screamed, cried, or packed a bag. But Zuri didn't do any of that. When she saw the text message pop up on her husband's screen from a woman named Serafina saying, "I miss you," she didn't panic. She didn't get angry. She got even. Instead of confronting him, she replied for him. She typed 2 words that would change everything. "Come over." Welcome to the family. Welcome to Love Tales with Mr. Bennett. Today we are telling a story about the difference between insecurity and power. It's a Tuesday night. The rain is falling. Silas, a good man with a dangerous blind spot, is making pasta for his wife. The evening is perfect, until a vibration on the counter shatters the peace. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had that gut feeling, that quiet intuition that tells you someone is smiling a little too brightly at your partner? Maybe it's a coworker who texts too late. Maybe it's a friend who doesn't respect boundaries. We have all felt that cold drop in our stomach. The question is, how did you handle it? Did you fight? Did you freeze? In relationships, we often think the enemy is the partner who might be slipping. But often, the real enemy is our own reaction. If you scream, you look crazy. If you accuse, you look insecure. But if you maintain your composure, you become the one in charge. Zuri teaches us that you don't have to fight for your spot in your own home. You just have to remind everyone who the queen is. If you believe that protecting your relationship requires wisdom more than noise, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss a lesson in love, loyalty, and life. And do me a favor, hit the like button if you think Zuri did the right thing by inviting the other woman to dinner. Let's see how many of you are on Team Zuri. So what happens when the mistress actually shows up, expecting a lonely husband, and walks straight into a 5-course dinner with the wife? Does the marriage survive the night? Let's find out. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind that usually invites exhaustion. The city outside was a chaotic mess of honking horns and flash floods, grey and miserable. But inside the Sterling household, the weather didn't matter. Here, 30 floors up, it was a sanctuary. The Sterling penthouse was designed to be a fortress against the world. It wasn't just the expensive furniture or the modern art that lined the hallway. It was the energy of the place. It was a rule they had established 5 years ago: no matter what war you fight outside these doors, when you cross the threshold, you lay down your weapons. Silas stood by the marble island in the center of the kitchen. The kitchen itself was a masterpiece of dark wood and creamstone, but tonight it was messy in the best possible way. A bag of artisan flour was open on the counter, a cloud of white dust settling on the dark surface. A pot of water was rolling with a boil on the stove, sending steam up toward the pendant lights. Silas had his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His forearms were strong, corded with muscle that shifted as he kneaded the dough. He wasn't rushing. He was moving with a steady, rhythmic cadence. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. He was making pasta from scratch. Tagliatelle, to be specific. It was Zuri's favorite comfort food. The scent was intoxicating. It was the smell of garlic browning in olive oil, the sharp freshness of torn basil, and the rich, savory aroma of slow-simmered tomatoes. Mixed with that was the scent of Silas himself, a woody amber cologne that Zuri had bought him for their anniversary. It was a smell that signaled safety. Zuri watched him from the plush velvet sofa in the adjacent living area. She had just come home from a grueling consultation. Zuri was a crisis management expert for high-profile tech firms. Her entire day was spent putting out fires, managing egos, and spinning bad news into good outcomes. Her brain was constantly running at 100 miles an hour, analyzing threats, calculating risks. But seeing Silas there, completely in his element, serving her through the simple act of cooking, softened the tension in her shoulders. She kicked off her heels, letting her toes sink into the thick rug. She didn't say anything at first. She just drank in the sight of him. This is something we often forget in long-term relationships. We forget to look. We get so used to the person sharing our space that they become part of the furniture. We stop seeing the way the light hits their hair or the way their hands move. But Zuri never forgot. She knew that what they had was rare. She remembered a time when the view wasn't a city skyline, but a brick wall. 7 years ago, they were living in a studio apartment that smelled of damp drywall. Silas was working 2 jobs, trying to get his architecture firm off the ground. Zuri was an unpaid intern, surviving on coffee and ambition. There was a night, specifically, that Zuri often thought about. They had $40 to their name until payday, which was 3 days away. They were hungry, tired, and scared that they wouldn't make rent. Silas had gone to the store and bought a box of cheap pasta and a jar of sauce. He had cooked it on a hot plate with the same focus, the same care he was using now in their $1 million kitchen. He had plated it on chipped dishes, lit a half-used candle, and looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. "We won't be here forever, Zuri," he had told her that night. "I'm going to build you a castle. Just wait." He hadn't lied. He had worked 18-hour days. He had taken risks. He had failed, and she had picked him up. She had strategized for him, managed his books in the early days, and pushed him when he wanted to quit. They had climbed this mountain together, hand over hand, scraping their knees, bleeding a little, but never letting go. That was why they were unbreakable. They weren't just lovers, they were war buddies. They were partners in the truest sense of the word. Zuri stood up and walked over to him. The floor was cool beneath her bare feet. Silas didn't hear her approach over the sound of the jazz music playing softly from his phone on the counter. She wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his back. The cotton of his shirt was soft, and she could feel the heat radiating from him. She could feel the steady thrum of his heart beat against her ear. It was a slow, strong rhythm. "You didn't have to do all this," she murmured, her voice muffled slightly by his shirt. Silas paused. He didn't jump. He simply leaned back into her embrace, accepting her weight. He turned in her arms, wiping his flour-dusted hands on a towel tucked into his waist. He looked down at her. His blue eyes crinkled at the corners. He had the kind of face that aged well, lines that came from laughing, not frowning. "You were staring," he teased, his voice a low rumble that vibrated pleasantly in the quiet room. "I was admiring," Zuri corrected, tilting her head back to look at him. "There's a difference." Silas chuckled, a warm sound that seemed to wrap around her. He reached out and cupped her face. The contrast was striking, his pale hands against her rich cocoa skin. It was a visual she always loved, a representation of their differences creating something beautiful. He kissed her forehead, then the tip of her nose. Finally, he pressed his lips to hers. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a soft, lingering kiss that tasted of devotion. It was a kiss that said, "I see you, I appreciate you. I am here. I wanted to." Silas whispered against her lips as he pulled back just an inch. "I know you had a hard day. I saw your calendar. My job is to make the evening soft. Family, pay attention to this moment. This is crucial." Silas is not a villain. He is not a man who is actively looking to destroy his marriage. He is a man who loves his wife. He is a man who understands the concept of service. He knows that Zuri carries a heavy load, and he takes it upon himself to lighten it. This is what makes the incoming text message so dangerous. If Silas were a bad husband, if he were distant, cold, or abusive, the text from another woman would be expected. It would be a confirmation of what we already knew. But because Silas is good, because he is present, the text is a violation. It is a weed growing in a perfectly manicured garden. It doesn't belong. This moment establishes that the threat isn't coming from inside the marriage, it is coming from the outside. And sometimes the most dangerous threats are the ones that prey on nice people. "How is the sauce coming?" Zuri asked, stepping back but keeping her hand on his arm. She needed the connection. "Perfect," Silas said, turning back to the stove. He picked up a wooden spoon and stirred the deep red tomato reduction. "I added that splash of red wine you like. It needs about 5 more minutes to reduce, and then I'll drop the pasta." "You're amazing," she said. "I'm just a man making noodles," he joked. But she could see the pride in his posture. He loved taking care of her. The rain hammered harder against the windows, a sudden gust of wind rattling the pane. Inside, the jazz trumpet solo swelled, filling the room with a melancholy but sweet sound. "This song is a bit sad for a Tuesday, don't you think?" Silas asked, tapping the spoon on the side of the pot. "Babe, can you change the music? My phone is on the counter." And there it was. The request that would turn the evening upside down. Transparency. It is the gold standard of a healthy relationship. Silas didn't hide his phone. He didn't turn the screen down when he put it on the table. He didn't have a secret passcode. He asked his wife to handle his device because he had nothing to hide. Or so he thought. Zuri walked over to the marble counter where the phone lay. It was a sleek, modern device, the screen currently displaying the album art of the jazz playlist. She reached out. Her hand hovered for a split second. She wasn't looking for anything. She wasn't suspicious. She was just going to skip the track, maybe put on some old-school R&B, something with a little more rhythm to match the mood. Her finger touched the screen. Timing is a funny thing. If Zuri had gone to the bathroom first, she wouldn't have seen it. If Silas had kept his phone in his pocket, the moment would have passed. But the universe has a way of exposing things that need to be seen. Just as her thumb hovered over the next button, the banner notification slid down. Text message, sender, Serafina, work message, I miss you. The office feels so empty without our late-night talks. Just thinking about you. Zuri froze. The words felt like ice water splashed into the warm kitchen. She read it again. I miss you. She read the second line. The office feels so empty without our late-night talks. She read the closer. Just thinking about you. This wasn't a work email. This wasn't did you finish the report or meeting at 9 a.m. This was intimate. This was emotional. This was a woman reaching out across the digital void to touch a man who belonged to someone else. Zuri knew Serafina. Not well, but she knew the type. She was the new project manager at Silas's architecture firm. Zuri had met her once at the firm's holiday gala 3 months ago. Serafina was beautiful in a carefully constructed way. She was the kind of woman who laughed at jokes that weren't funny. She was the kind of woman who touched a man's arm when she spoke to him. At the gala, she had stood just a little too close to Silas. She had complimented his tie, his work, his vision. At the time, Zuri had brushed it off. Silas was a handsome, successful man. Women found him attractive. It was a fact of life. Zuri was confident enough in herself and her marriage not to be threatened by a little office flirting. But this was different. Late-night talks? Zuri thought. What late-night talks? She looked at the timestamp. It was 7:42 p.m. She looked at her husband's back. He was humming along to the music, unaware that a bomb had just dropped on his kitchen counter. He was shaking dried oregano into the pan, completely unburdened. Zuri stood at a crossroads. We all face these crossroads in life, though usually they aren't this dramatic. Path 1, the reaction. She could scream. She could shout, "Who is Serafina and why is she thinking about you?" She could throw the phone at him. It would be justified. The adrenaline was already flooding her system, urging her to fight. Path 2, the investigation. She could unlock the phone, read through their entire history, and look for the smoking gun. She could torture herself with every innocent text that might have a double meaning. Path 3, the strategy. Zuri looked at Silas. He wasn't acting like a guilty man. A guilty man guards his phone. A guilty man jumps when it vibrates. A guilty man doesn't ask his wife to change the music while his mistress is texting him. Zuri realized two things instantly. First, Silas likely didn't encourage this level of intimacy, but he was probably too polite to shut it down harshly. He was a nice guy, and sometimes nice guys are the easiest targets for predatory women. Second, Serafina was testing the waters. She was disrespecting Zuri's marriage. She was poking the bear to see if it would wake up. Insecurity screams. Confidence whispers. Zuri took a deep breath. She wouldn't play the role of the jealous, crazy wife. That's what Serafina wanted. If Zuri caused a scene, Silas would go to work tomorrow stressed and unhappy. Serafina would be there, ready to offer a listening ear, ready to be the easy option, while Zuri was the difficult wife. No. Zuri would not give her that satisfaction. She decided to play a different role. She would play the queen. If Serafina wanted Silas's attention so badly, she could come and see exactly who he belonged to. Zuri stared at the screen. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with a cold, calculated focus. She unlocked the phone. She knew the passcode. It was their anniversary. She opened the message. She didn't scroll up. She didn't care what was said before. She only cared about right now. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard. She wasn't Zuri right now. She was channeling Silas. She typed, "Come over. I'm making dinner. It would be great to see you." She read it back. It was friendly. It was inviting. It was exactly the kind of open door a woman like Serafina would run through without thinking twice. Zuri hit send. The bubble turned blue. Delivered. Then, quick as a flash, she deleted the text from the sent folder. She left Serafina's incoming message there, bold and unread, so Silas would see it later. But the invitation? That was gone. She placed the phone back on the counter, face down. "Music changed?" Silas asked, turning around with a smile. He had no idea that his wife had just invited a shark into their tank. "Just picking the perfect song," Zuri replied. Her voice was steady. It was smooth. But if you looked closely, there was a dangerous smirk playing on her lips. "We might have a guest." Silas frowned slightly, confused. "A guest? Tonight?" "Yes," Zuri said, walking toward the bedroom. "Someone who misses you." The trap was set. The invitation was sent. Now, all Zuri had to do was wait. Family. This is where the game changes. Most people think boundaries are about keeping people out, but sometimes the best way to handle a boundary crosser is to bring them all the way in and let them see that they don't fit. Zuri is about to teach Serafina a lesson she will never forget, and she's going to teach Silas a lesson he didn't know he needed to learn. The rain outside hammered against the glass, but the storm inside was just beginning. There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a house right before a storm breaks. It isn't quiet exactly. The jazz was still playing in the kitchen. The pots were still bubbling, but the energy had shifted. The air felt charged, heavy with electricity. Zuri walked into the master bedroom and closed the door softly behind her. She didn't slam it. Slamming doors is for children. It is for people who have lost control. Zuri was in total control. She leaned against the heavy wood of the door for just a second, closing her eyes. She took a breath. In for 4 seconds, hold for 4, out for 4. The box breathing technique she used before high-stakes board meetings, because that is what this was. This wasn't a fight with her husband. It was a negotiation for the sanctity of her life. She walked into her closet. The lights flickered on automatically, illuminating rows of designer clothes. Why change, you might ask? Why not face the intruder in sweatpants and a messy bun? Because appearance is language. If Zuri greeted Serafina looking tired, worn down from work and disheveled, Serafina would see exactly what she wanted to see, a wife who had let herself go. A wife who was too busy to keep the spark alive. A wife who was safe to replace. Zuri ran her fingers along the fabrics. Cotton? No. Denim? Too casual. She needed something that said ownership. She needed something that said, I am the mistress of this house, and you are a guest. She stopped at a hanger near the bag. Silk. She chose a silk lounge gown. It was the color of champagne, flowing like water against her skin. It wasn't lingerie. It was too elegant for that. It was the kind of thing a woman wears when she has nothing to prove. She shed her work clothes, the structured blazer, the slacks that felt like armor from a different war, and slipped into the silk. It was cool against her skin. She tied the sash at her waist, watching herself in the full-length mirror. She looked regal. She looked untouchable. She went to her vanity. She didn't apply a full face of makeup that would look desperate, as if she were trying too hard. Instead, she touched up her lipstick, a deep oxblood red, a power color. She brushed her hair back, letting it fall in loose, dark waves. Finally, she reached for the perfume bottle on the tray. Santal 33. It was her signature scent, leathery, spicy, distinct. She dabbed it on her pulse points. When Serafina walked in, Zuri wanted the air to smell like her. She wanted her scent to mark the territory before she even spoke a word. Meanwhile, back in the kitchen, Silas was confused. He was a simple man in the best ways. He dealt in concrete, steel, and blueprints. He understood loads and structural integrity. He did not understand the complex, invisible currents of female intuition. He checked the pasta. It was perfectly al dente. He drained the water, the steam billowing up into the extraction fan. A guest? He muttered to himself. He ran through the mental list. Was it Zuri's mother? No, she was in Florida. Her sister? Maybe. But Zuri usually warned him days in advance. He looked at his phone sitting on the counter. The screen was dark. He had no idea that a digital grenade had been launched from that device just minutes ago. He trusted Zuri implicitly. If she said someone was coming, someone was coming. He grabbed a third pasta bowl from the cabinet. He didn't question why. He just prepared to serve. That was Silas. Always accommodating, always the host. When Zuri walked back into the kitchen, the change was instantaneous. Silas looked up from the stove and actually stopped stirring. He blinked. Wow, he said, a smile spreading across his face. You look incredible. Is that new? Zuri walked past him, the silk whispering against the floor. She didn't stop to hug him this time. She went straight to the dining table. I've had it for a while, she said, her voice light, conversational. I just felt like dressing up for dinner. It's not every day we have company. She reached into the sideboard and pulled out the good placemats, the woven gold ones they usually saved for Thanksgiving. Silas wiped his hands and leaned against the counter, watching her. So, are you going to tell me who the mystery guest is, or do I have to guess? Zuri set the first place setting. Fork on the left, knife on the right. You'll see soon enough, she said. She's a colleague of yours, actually. A colleague? Silas asked, racking his brain. From the firm. Yes, Zuri said. She set the second place setting. She messaged, said she was feeling a bit lonely, missed the office energy. I thought it would be charitable to invite her over. Silas frowned. Who? Karen. Jessica. Serafina, Zuri said. She dropped the name casually, like she was talking about the weather. She didn't look at him. She placed the third wine glass on the table. Clink. Silas froze. Serafina? Yes, Zuri said, finally looking up. Her eyes were clear. Is that a problem? No, Silas stammered slightly, not out of guilt, but out of sheer awkwardness. No, it's just weird. She texted you. She texted us, Zuri corrected smoothly. Technically, it was a lie, but morally, it was the truth. When you marry someone, you become one entity. A text to him is a text to her. I told her to come over. I figured if she misses you that much, she should come see us in our element. Silas scratched the back of his neck. He looked uncomfortable. She's intense. She's new, trying to make friends, I guess. But Zuri, tonight was supposed to be just us. It still is just us, baby, Zuri said, walking over to him. She smoothed the collar of his shirt. We are the unit. She is just the audience. Listen to the language Zuri is using here. She is just the audience. Zuri is reframing the situation before it even begins. She isn't asking Silas to choose. She isn't accusing him of inviting her. She is taking ownership of the invitation. By doing this, she eliminates Silas's ability to defend Serafina. If Silas defends her now, he looks ungrateful for Zuri's hospitality. It is a master stroke of reverse psychology. Okay, Silas sighed, turning back to the pasta. He tossed the noodles in the rich red sauce coating every strand. If you're okay with it, I'm okay with it. I just hope there's enough food. There is always enough, Zuri said. Predators don't eat much anyway. What? I said, I'm sure she's not that hungry. Zuri smiled. The next 15 minutes were a study in tension. Zuri moved around the dining room like a conductor preparing an orchestra. She dimmed the lights. She lit the taper candles in the center of the table. She opened a bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, a vintage they had been saving. Why waste good wine on a woman she despised? Because Zuri wasn't going to give Serafina the satisfaction of a cheap experience. If Serafina was going to intrude, she was going to feel underdressed, underprepared, and out of her league. Zuri was setting a stage that demanded respect. Silas carried the large serving bowl to the table. The steam curled up into the candlelight. She should be here any minute, Silas said, checking his watch. She lives downtown, right? That's about 20 minutes with this rain. As if on cue, the buzzer for the building rang. The sound cut through the room. Zuri walked to the intercom. She pressed the button. Delivery? The doorman asked. No, it wasn't the doorman. It's Serafina. A voice crackled through the speaker. It sounded breathless, eager. Zuri looked at Silas. She held his gaze for a long moment. Send her up, Zuri said. She pressed the button that unlocked the elevator. The elevator in their building was fast. It would take exactly 45 seconds for Serafina to rise from the lobby to the penthouse. 45 seconds. Zuri walked over to the wine bottle and poured 3 glasses. The red liquid swirled into the crystal. Silas, Zuri said softly. Yeah? Remember who you are tonight, she said. It was cryptic, but heavy. I'm just me, Zuri. He laughed nervously. Good, she said, because she's expecting someone else. The elevator dinged. Zuri didn't go to the door. She stood by the dining table, bathed in candlelight, wearing her silk armor, holding a glass of wine. She looked like the CEO of the universe. Get the door, honey, she told her husband. Our guest has arrived. The elevator chimed. A crisp, digital sound that announced the arrival of the intruder. Zuri stood by the dining table, her fingers lightly resting on the stem of her wine glass. She didn't move toward the door. She stayed exactly where she was, framed by the candlelight and the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her. She was the centerpiece of the room. Silas walked to the heavy oak door. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before gripping the handle. He was a man walking into a fog, unsure of the shapes looming in front of him. He pulled the door open. There she was. Serafina stood in the hallway, dripping wet. She was wearing a beige trench coat, belted tightly at the waist. Her hair was damp, plastered slightly to her cheeks in a way that was meant to look cinematic, like a heroine from a romance movie who had braved the storm for true love. She was smiling, a bright, expectant smile that was aimed directly at Silas. "I made it," she breathed, stepping forward as if to hug him. "The rain is insane, Silas. I just had to see." Then she looked past his shoulder. The smile didn't just fade, it evaporated. Her eyes locked onto Zuri. Zuri raised her glass in a silent toast. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply existed, radiant and imposing in her champagne silk gown, looking down from the moral high ground. Serafina froze mid-step. Her eyes darted from Zuri to Silas, then back to Zuri. The confusion on her face was absolute. She had expected a lonely husband. She had expected a quiet, intimate complaining session about a nagging wife. She had not expected the wife to be standing there, looking like a goddess, waiting for her. Oh, Serafina stammered, her voice, previously low and sultry, pitched up an octave. "I didn't realize. The text said." "Come in, Serafina," Zuri called out. Her voice was warm, velvet wrapped around steel. "Don't let the heat out. We've been expecting you." Silas stepped back, holding the door open. He looked at Serafina, really looked at her, for the first time that night. He saw the way she was dressed beneath the coat. He caught a glimpse of a short hemline. He saw the shock on her face. And then he looked back at his wife, who was the picture of grace. "Right," Silas said, his voice rougher than usual. "Come in." Serafina stepped into the penthouse. She looked small. The grandness of the space, the high ceilings, the smell of rich food and expensive perfume, it all seemed to shrink her. She unbuttoned her trench coat with fumbling fingers, revealing a tight black dress that was entirely inappropriate for a casual Tuesday dinner. It was a dress meant for a nightclub or a seduction. In contrast to Zuri's elegant, flowing silk, Serafina looked cheap. It was a harsh realization, but an undeniable one. I hope I'm not intruding," Serafina said, clutching her purse like a shield. Silas mentioned the project was stressing him out, and I was in the neighborhood." "You're not intruding at all," Zuri said, gliding forward. She didn't offer to take the coat. She let Serafina hold on to it, let her carry her own baggage. "Silas told me how much you miss the office dynamic. It must be hard, being new to the city. Loneliness can make people do strange things." The dig was subtle, buried under layers of polite concern. "Here," Zuri gestured to the third chair. "Sit. We were just about to eat." The dinner that followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare. They sat in a triangle. Silas at the head, Zuri to his right, Serafina to his left. The air was thick, filled with the clinking of silverware and the low hum of the jazz music that Zuri had left playing. Silas served the pasta. He was quiet, his eyes moving between the two women. He was beginning to wake up. The fog was lifting. He watched how Serafina sat, perched on the edge of her chair, nervous and twitchy. He watched how Zuri ate, calm and deliberate. "So, Serafina," Zuri began, swirling her wine. "Silas tells me you're a project manager. That must be demanding." "It is," Serafina answered quickly, eager to talk about work, the one area where she felt she had a connection with Silas. "The deadline for the Hudson Tower is approaching. Silas and I we've been collaborating closely, late nights." She glanced at Silas, trying to conjure an inside joke, a shared moment of intimacy. "Remember last Thursday, Silas, when we ordered that Thai food and stayed until midnight?" It was a desperate move. She was trying to prove to Zuri that she knew Silas in a way Zuri didn't. She was trying to mark her territory. But Zuri didn't flinch. She took a bite of pasta, chewed slowly, and swallowed. "I remember," Zuri said softly. "He came home smelling of lemongrass and exhaustion. I drew him a bath and massaged his shoulders for an hour until he fell asleep." Zuri looked Serafina dead in the eye. "That's the thing about late nights, Serafina. You get his work hours, you get the stress, you get the deadlines, but at the end of the day, no matter how late it gets, he comes home to this." She gestured around the room and then to herself. "He comes home to peace. That is something you can't build in a cubicle." Silas stopped eating. He looked at his wife. He had never heard her speak like this, so protective, so possessive, yet so utterly polite. He felt a surge of something hot in his chest. It wasn't anger. It was admiration. Serafina shifted in her seat. Her face flushed. She took a large gulp of wine. "I didn't mean—" Serafina started, her voice shaking. "I just meant we work well together. He's a great mentor." "I'm sure he is," Zuri smiled. "He's a good man. A nice man. Sometimes too nice." Zuri turned her gaze to Silas. "Aren't you, baby?" Silas set his fork down. The sound rang out against the china. The nice guy veneer was cracking. He was looking at Serafina, really seeing her now. He saw the text message in his mind, "I miss you." He saw the dress. He saw the manipulation. He realized that by being polite, by not shutting her down earlier, he had invited this disrespect into his home. He had allowed this woman to think she had a chance to compete with his wife. "I try to be kind," Silas said, his voice low and serious. He looked directly at Serafina. "But I think sometimes kindness is misinterpreted." Serafina looked panic-stricken. "Silas—" "My wife is right," Silas continued. He didn't look at Zuri. He kept his eyes on the intruder. "I love my work. But this," he pointed to the table, to the food, to Zuri, "this is my life. The office is just where I go to pay for it." The silence that followed was deafening. Zuri didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply picked up the bottle of wine. "More Cabernet, Serafina?" she asked. "It's a vintage. We were saving it for a special occasion, but I suppose clarity is worth celebrating." Serafina looked at the glass, then at Silas, then at Zuri. She realized, finally, that she hadn't walked into a broken marriage. She hadn't found a crack in the foundation to pry open. She had walked into a fortress, and the gate was closing behind her. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I should go," Serafina said. "I'm not feeling well." "Oh, that's a shame," Zuri said, remaining seated. "You barely touched your pasta." And Silas made it by hand. "I have to go," Serafina insisted, grabbing her coat. She didn't put it on. She just clutched it to her chest, backing away toward the door. Silas stood up. "I'll see you out." "No," Zuri said. Silas froze. Serafina froze. "Sit down, Silas," Zuri said. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a judge's gavel. "Finish your dinner." She turned her head to Serafina. "You can find the door, can't you? It's the same way you came in." It was the final power move. Zuri was showing Serafina that she wasn't even worth the effort of an escort. She was dismissing her like a servant. Serafina turned and fled. The sound of her heels clicking frantically against the hardwood floor echoed through the penthouse. Then came the sound of the heavy front door opening and slamming shut. The silence returned. But this time it wasn't tense. It was clean. It was the silence of a room that had been purged of a bad smell. Silas sat back down slowly. He looked at the empty chair where Serafina had been. Then he looked at Zuri. Zuri took a sip of her wine, her eyes locked on his. "Now," she said softly, "where were we?" The heavy oak door had clicked shut, but the sound seemed to hang in the air for a long time, vibrating against the walls like the final note of a song. Silas didn't move. He sat at the head of the table, his hands resting on the white tablecloth. The spot to his left was empty, save for a half-full glass of wine and a plate of cooling pasta. The energy Serafina had brought into the house, that frantic, needy, chaotic energy, was gone. The room felt different now. The air was clearer, lighter. Silas looked down at his own hands. They were the same hands that had built skyscrapers, the same hands that had kneaded dough an hour ago, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he didn't know what to do with them. He felt foolish. He felt exposed. Zuri sat to his right. She picked up her fork, twirled a nest of tagliatelle against her spoon, and took a bite. She chewed slowly, savoring the flavor of the sauce he had made. "It's good," she said, her voice breaking the silence. "You really nailed the reduction this time." Silas looked at her. He looked at the woman who had just dismantled an intruder without raising her voice, without shedding a tear, and without breaking a sweat. He looked at the silk gown, the calm posture, the absolute certainty in her eyes. "Zuri," he breathed out. It wasn't a question, it was an exhaled confession. "Eat, Silas," she said gently. "I can't eat," he said, pushing his plate away slightly. "How can you eat after that?" Zuri set her fork down. She turned her chair slightly so she was facing him fully. The candlelight danced in her dark eyes, making them look like pools of obsidian. "I can eat because my conscience is clear," she said, "and my home is safe. Why shouldn't I enjoy my dinner?" Silas shook his head, running a hand over his face. "You invited her. You actually invited her." "I did." "Why?" Silas asked. He wasn't angry, he was desperate to understand. "Why put yourself through that? Why put us through that? You could have just told me. You could have told me to block her." "And if I had told you to block her, what would you have done?" Zuri asked. "I would have done it," Silas said immediately. "Yes," Zuri nodded. "You would have, because you love me. But you would have wondered why I was being so insecure. You would have thought I was overreacting to a friendly coworker. You would have blocked her, but in the back of your mind, you would have thought she was just a nice girl, and I was the jealous wife." Silas opened his mouth to argue, but the words died in his throat. She was right. He knew she was right. "I didn't want your obedience, Silas," Zuri continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "I wanted your vision. I needed you to see her, not the version of her that exists in the office under fluorescent lights. I needed you to see her here. I needed you to see how she looked at me. I needed you to see how she disrespected our home." Silas looked at the empty chair again. He replayed the dinner in his mind, the comments about late nights, the way she tried to rewrite their professional history into a romance, the way she had looked at Zuri with veiled hostility. "I didn't see it before," Silas admitted quietly. "I really didn't. I just thought she was lonely." "She is lonely," Zuri agreed. "But that is not your problem to fix. You are a provider, Silas. It's in your DNA. You want to build things, you want to fix things, you want to help people. It's one of the reasons I fell in love with you. But you have to learn that you cannot keep everyone warm by setting yourself on fire." She reached out and covered his hand with hers. Her skin was warm. "Being nice is dangerous," she said. "When you are too nice to a woman who wants you, you aren't being polite. You are leaving the door unlocked. And tonight, I had to show you what walks in when you leave the door unlocked." Silas turned his hand over and gripped hers tightly. He felt a wave of shame wash over him, but beneath the shame was a profound sense of gratitude. Most women would have declared war on him. Zuri had declared war for him. "You're terrifying," Silas said, a small, weary smile finally touching his lips. "I'm protective," she corrected. "There is a difference." Silas stood up. He walked over to the counter where his phone was still sitting, the device that had started this entire earthquake. He picked it up. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't hesitate. He unlocked it, went to his contacts and found Serafina. He scrolled down. Block caller. Then he went to his messages. He didn't just delete the thread. He reported it as spam. He scrubbed her digital existence from his life. He walked back to the table and placed the phone face down, far away from his plate. "She's gone," Silas said. "From the phone, from the house, and tomorrow I'll make sure she's gone from my team. I'll request a transfer for her. I don't care if HR makes a fuss. I won't work with her." Zuri watched him. She saw the shift in his posture. He wasn't the confused man stirring sauce anymore. He was the husband who remembered his vows. "Good," Zuri said. Silas walked around the table. He didn't go back to his chair. He came to hers. He knelt down on one knee, ignoring the hardness of the floor, so he was eye level with her. He took both of her hands in his. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was thick with emotion. "I am sorry I let her get close enough to make you feel like you had to do this. I am sorry I was blind. It won't happen again." Zuri looked at him. She saw the sincerity in his blue eyes. She leaned forward and kissed his forehead, a benediction. "I know," she said. "I forgive you. But Silas?" "Yeah?" "Next time you make pasta," she smirked, "don't ask me to change the music." Silas laughed. It was a genuine sound, breaking the last of the tension in the room. He rested his forehead against hers. "Deal," he whispered. The rain continued to fall outside, washing the city clean. But inside the penthouse, the storm was over. They sat there for a long time, the food forgotten, just holding on to each other. They had passed the test. Marriage isn't about never facing threats. It isn't about living in a bubble where no one ever looks at your partner. Marriage is about what you do when the threat arrives. It's about having a partner who is smart enough to fight with strategy, and a partner who is humble enough to admit when they were wrong. Zuri and Silas were unbreakable not because they were perfect, but because they protected each other, even from themselves. "Come on," Zuri said softly, standing up and pulling him with her. "Let's leave the dishes. The sauce will stain the bowls, but I don't care." "Where are we going?" Silas asked, though he already knew. "To the sofa," she said, leading him toward the living room where the view of the city was vast and beautiful. "I think we need to restart this date night. No phones, no interruptions, just us." As they walked away from the table, the candlelight flickered on the empty wineglass where Serafina had sat, a ghost of a problem that had been exorcised by the power of a woman who knew her worth.